Welcome. In a moment, I'm going to share a conversation that I had with Justin Osmond, the son of Merrill Osmond, the lead singer of the famous Osmond Family. I first reached out to Justin after reading his book, Hearing with My Heart, and I was so deeply moved by his words because his story felt like a mirror to the experiences of kids today who go to their neighborhood school and are the one and only kid with hearing loss. Justin grew up in the mainstream environment, just like 90% of our current deaf and hard of hearing students today. And Justin didn't use sign language, also, just like 90% of our students in the mainstream today. He is incredibly open in his book about the shyness and the insecurity that defined him in his early years. And he shares in our upcoming interview exactly what had to happen, this shift in his own mindset and the support that he needed to finally be able to find where he fit into the world. I wanted to bring him to you because I know how many deaf and hard of hearing students today struggle with this exact same shyness and insecurity, and how many of these kids with hearing loss are feeling that same quiet isolation that Justin talks about so candidly in this interview. Stay to the end because I'm going to show you how you can hear more stories like Justin's so that these kids with hearing loss can get more inspiration and more encouragement along their journey. Let's go ahead and jump to my conversation with Justin. Awesome. What was it like being raised as an Osmond?
Growing up in a world-renowned musical family, it was fun. It was great. I got to meet a lot of wonderful, crazy people. I got to sleep in Elvis Presley's bed at
Really?
the hotel. When he was off on tour, he would have to come stay in his suite, penthouse. I was really young. I can't really remember, but I have pictures of me hanging out in his suite. And so I got to meet a lot of cool people. But there's a big but. I'm the son of the lead singer of the Osmond, my dad, Merrill. And I love watching my dad perform, my uncle, Donnie, Marie, and all those. It was fun watching them. But imagine you could hear, but you couldn't understand the words, the lyrics of this world-renowned family. And that was frustrating. That was hard, really challenging. I had a lot of anxiety, depression, just disconnect. Even though I was blessed to be in a wonderful family, they were always there for me. But they didn't have newborn screening when I was born. So I went 2 years with complete silence. And after 2 years, my parents noticed that there was something wrong with me. So they took me to the doctor, and that's when they immediately diagnosed me with a severe to profound hearing loss. And so they immediately started, my parents didn't want me to do sign language in the beginning. They wanted me to learn how to speak. And so I took about 13 years of intense speech, language, pathology, and therapy. And I'm grateful for that. But even today, when I meet people, sometimes they will ask where I'm from. My accent is a little bit different. And so they would always ask if I'm from Canada or England or even Australia. And don't get me wrong, I love their accent. It's a compliment. But deep down inside, it hurt because I worked so hard to try to sound normal. But I remember growing up wishing I had that golden throat like my dad or my Uncle Donnie. I just wish I could sing like them. But that wasn't for me. But then it dawned on me. So let me back up just a little bit. I hated the sound of my voice growing up. I wrestled with that, but for quite some time. But then, after a while, I realized that voice, my voice, that's me. But why do I need to try to sound like somebody else? Why do I want to be like my dad or my Uncle Donnie? That's me. That's my voice. And at that point, I realized that I don't need to try to be a remix or try to be someone else that I'm not. And that deaf accent, it's not a flaw. It's a feature. And so I realized that my deaf accent is my badge. That's my brand. That's my logo. That's my signature. That's my identity. It's my story. And so as soon as I stopped worrying about how the world thought of me and just owned up to it, that's when I found my freedom and my joy and going forward. So the moment I stop trying to be like someone else, I try to be a remix of someone else. Just be you. Let people get to know the quirky, imperfect, real, fantastic you. And that's what I had to learn over time. And once I accepted that, I was so much happier with myself.
So, how old were you when you accepted that? And what happened that made you kind of push through that and accept that as part of who you are?
That's a great question. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that question as far as how old I was. I want to say I was in my late teenage years. So I think one of the questions you wanted to ask was, when did I start learning sign language?
Yeah.
Because during that time frame, like when I was about 18 years old, I kind of went through an identity crisis. Who am I? Like, where do I fit? I don't fit in this musical family. I'm the black sheep of my family. All these thoughts going through my head. And then one day I wanted to serve a mission for my church, volunteer my time and go on a mission. So I sent in an application and it came back and it asked me to go to England, but to learn in British Sign Language. And I've
Wow.
never learned sign language before. And in the beginning, I was a little bit like, I don't know how I feel about this. My parents had really wanted me to just to do verbal, no sign language.
Mm.
But again, another but. I went and I accepted. I went to England. By the way, England was beautiful. I went to Scotland, Ireland, Wales, all over England. And I learned British Sign Language, which is completely different than American Sign Language. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S. It's
Yes.
all two hands instead of
Yeah.
one hand. Changed my life, my whole paradigm thinking, perspective on life completely changed. This is who I am. This is my world. I was able to connect with all my other deaf friends and brothers and sisters, and like we're all one big family. And so I was really able to connect and identify my true identity of who I was. And then 2 years I served there. I came home, and then I was like so excited with sign language, I decided to learn American Sign Language. And by the time I was 21,
Okay.
and so that's how I got into sign language. And my
Interesting.
parents, I just helped them realize, hey, this is just another language, but this is a big part of me. This is a big chunk of who I am. I'm in a unique situation. I can live in the hearing world. I can also be in the deaf world at the same time. But people always ask me, which one am I most comfortable in? I'm comfortable in both. Really. It's I feel one over
You know,
the other.
I
Um,
think you hit something that I feel myself as a teacher. First of all, back when I started my career, there were two schools of thought. It was very separate. You could either sign or you could speak. It was kind of like they didn't combine at that time. You had to choose which route you wanted to go. I think today that's a little bit different. I think today there's more of a acceptance of that you can have both worlds and you don't have to say I identify as deaf or I identify as hearing, but you can have two parts of you that kind of have two places that you belong.
There wasn't a lot of resources back then. And so I remember my mom, she took me all the way across the country to the John Tracy Clinic, the Alexander Graham Bell Association, the Hearing Loss Association of America, all the different organizations. And then she was kind of like my, what do you, who was Helen Keller's teacher? Ann
Mm.
Sullivan. Yeah, that was my mom. She was my Ann Sullivan. She just worked with me every day. I had a lot of speech therapists. But I think my parents, they just wanted me to learn how to talk. They didn't know a whole lot about the deaf, the big D, the small D. They were just never a part of that. And they
Mhm.
wanted me to just try to be in this hearing world. They didn't know any different. So they just wanted me to go this direction. That's how they felt about it. They prayed about it, they said. And I'll be honest, it was a lot of work. Every morning, we wake up at 6 o'clock, and my mom will work with me for 30 minutes on speech therapy. And then I had to practice the piano for 30 minutes and the violin for 30 minutes and read for 30 minutes, then breakfast and go to school and come back and read. It was just a very rigid, busy schedule that my parents put me on. So taught me hard work, ethics,
Mhm.
and a lot of audiologists, they look at my audiogram and they're like, oh my goodness, how with this that's a profound hearing, like, can you speak so well?
Yeah.
And I credit to my mom. I credit to all the wonderful. Growing up with a hearing loss, I had every reason to feel limited. Like I didn't have a voice. I didn't belong, or people treated me differently. But what changed everything was the people who invested in me anyway. They didn't see what I lacked. They saw what I could become. And that I think has made all the difference. for me. And I'm very lucky and blessed to have that support behind me.
Besides your parents, can you think of somebody who you look back at and you were like, that person provided me that support and encouraged me through all of that? Can you think of any person that was
And
that person for you?
my very first speech therapist, her name was Carol. I was a young boy and I was a tough kid. I was I was not an easy, pleasant kid to be around when I was younger. But I remember there's some video. I went back and like 40 years ago. I'm almost 50 now, but I remember when I got into my 30s, I told my mom, hey, Carol, she's still around, you think? I should probably go back and tell her I'm sorry for being a horrible student and never giving up on me and just encouraging me, like you said, and motivating me and just believing in me and etc. And I just wanted to go back and tell her thank you. So my mom, and she looked her up and found out where she lived. I remember we drove there and I remember knocking on the front door and she was in a wheelchair and she was much older. And I remember she looked up at me, did not know who I was. I was 3 years old when she taught me and worked with me. So this is 30 years later. I'm totally different, right? And she's never really heard me speak before. And she's fancy. I think I woke her up from a nap or something because, anyway, I'm a complete stranger. And I said, hey, so sorry to bother you, but my name is Justin Osmond. And when I said my name, she started to cry. And then I started to cry. And I just told her I just wanted to say thank you for never giving up on me and believing in me, and so I can now speak with passion, hear with conviction, sign to, and all those different things. And so I told her that she wasn't my hero, that she's my hero. And so that's another person to answer the question. Carol, she was my hearing angel.
Now, these days, the teachers of deaf students are called itinerant teachers. They drive to see a student, they work one on one, and then they leave, and then they drive to see another student one on. Did you ever have any teachers of the deaf like that, or classroom or anything like that?
Yeah, yes, I did. I had a couple. One of them came from Denver, and I remember my parent put her up on a board, and she would work with me one
Wow.
on one. Her name was Nancy, so
Mm,
she's another hearing angel. Again, just for them to come and take that time to work with us one on one. It
yeah.
just, even to this day, my wife and my kids, they still correct me on some of the consonant sounds. I still can't hear the T or the CH, the SH. I can't hear the difference.
Yeah.
But I'll be forever grateful for those people that intervened in my life and helped me,
Yeah.
like I said, be who I am today.
I want to ask you more about England. You said
Yeah.
that's kind of where you fell in love with signing. Did you meet a group of deaf people over there? What happened over there that you were like, this is special to me?
So I served for my church, the Church of
Mhm.
Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there was a church over there. They had a lot of deaf people there. It's people, it's just
Oh,
different. I get
yeah.
confused sometimes.
Yeah.
But anyway, just at first I'm not very good. I'm not very skillful. I'm still learning. But they were so accepting and loving. And that's when I really like, wow, these are my peeps. This is my family.
They were deaf over there?
They were deaf, yeah. There was
Okay.
a lot of deaf people over there. And I'd go to the deaf clubs, just hang out with them, and I made so many wonderful friends. And
Mm.
just, I still keep in touch with them to this day.
This day.
And so, yeah, that was the moment that really changed my life.
Ah,
That's when I found out that England, America, they both speak English, but why is the sign language different?
I know, it's
The same
fascinating.
language, come on. One of
Fascinating.
them with an accent.
Most of the kids today in America in the schools, they are mainstreamed, and about 10% of them use sign. Most of them are raised oral, but a lot of them we have these conversations just, or we try to expose to other kids who also have a hearing loss, because most of them are the only person that they know who's deaf. They don't have any role models. They don't know anybody else who has a hearing loss like them. In fact, many kids are little and they think that when they grow up, they'll be able to hear because they've never met another deaf adult. So they think that their hearing loss will disappear when they grow
Hmm.
up. But I guess what would be your advice or your conversation with these kids who they don't know anybody else who's deaf? They are the only person, and maybe they feel very kind of removed, like you talked about in your family.
That's a great question. I would say to all my young deaf brothers and sisters, my family and friends, first of all, you're not alone. You are not alone. And I've had to learn that the hard way, but we may have a hearing loss, but that hearing loss doesn't have us. It doesn't own us, it doesn't control us, or it doesn't even define us. But instead, we should let it refine us, let it purge us, mold us, propel us, empower us. I'm not saying that in a way that I'm ashamed of my hearing loss. I love my hearing loss. But don't let it define you, but let it refine you. Let it elevate you and let it give you an edge. For example, losing my hearing has taught me to listen in ways that most people don't. That is what's giving me the edge. It's a reminder that your greatest challenges may actually be hidden superpowers in disguise, if that makes sense. So I just sometimes we get so hard on ourselves, but that's with everybody. I always I believe that limit we shouldn't limit our challenges, but we should challenge our limits. Everybody has them. Everybody has limitations. Some are physical, mental, emotional, circumstantial. In our case, we're talking about people that have a hearing loss. I've always believed that our limitation, they're actually invitation to grow, to expand, and to become a better version of ourselves. Because the truth is, I believe that we were never limited in the first place. We've just been waiting to see how incredible and how amazing we really are and how unstoppable we really are. So what we need to learn is to own our limits and then crush them, smash them, whatever the challenges may be. And instead of letting those hold us back. I think a lot of times I'm deaf, I have all these excuses, etc. But instead, make it a superpower in disguise, or
Yeah.
let it propel you forward instead of holding you back. And so just remember that we may have a hearing loss, but that hearing loss does not have us. And if people underestimate you, you can use that to your advantage because nobody expects you to win. Nobody expects you to put up a fight. And that's when you
Mm.
can kind of take them by surprise. Yeah, I would say that we may have to put a little bit more mental exertion into whatever situation or whatever challenge we're dealing with, but that's okay. That teaches us to work hard and work harder. But I believe that we can do anything we set our heart to, our mind to, despite the challenges that we may have.
So I love that. I love just kind of what you're saying. And I know that that's truly how I think as adults, as teachers and parents, we see our students, our kids like this. But oftentimes when we're talking to our students or our kids, they don't see that about themselves. They just feel very different. So, what's your advice for teachers, speech and language therapists, for parents? Like, how can we just encourage kids that having a hearing loss is okay?
No, it's a great question. That's a loaded question. A lot of the younger kids nowadays, everything was on social media, the media, people comparing. There's a thing called stigma, right?
Mm.
I went through that, but back when we were younger, Stephanie, you and I, the cosmetic side was a lot different than it is now. You can't even
Yeah.
see my hearing aids. Back then, you had the big bulky hardware. I had the wire coming out of my ears, big
The-
box hanging on my belt. I stood out like a
yeah,
robot.
yes.
And unfortunately, I got made fun of. I got bullied. I remember I even got beat up after school because I just looked differently. I talked differently. And it was sad. But I agree with what you said earlier that it's not really that nowadays. It's much more accepted. And honestly, today, the hearing technology is so advanced. It's like people want, what we have.
Yeah.
And they're like, these are cool gadgets. And
Mm.
it's not really a stigma, but the stigma is still there. But people will find out very soon that they will recognize that a hearing loss is more obvious than a hearing aid. and then they'll recognize that, they'll see that. But we live in a day and age today where, like you said, it's much more accepted. But we need to, just because something in our life is broken, like my case, my ears are broken, and that's okay. But just because it's broken, people underestimate you, or they say that you're not good enough. But we need to throw out that misconception or that misunderstanding that just because something in your life is broken, that we're impaired or disabled.
Mm,
No, it's an advantage. It's not a curse, but a blessing.
mm,
It's not a penalty, but an opportunity.
yeah.
And this attitude and this mentality has helped me to defy the odds of doing things I was told I could never do. I was told, even though I come from a musical family, that I could never sing, and that part true. But I that I would never be able to play a musical instrument. And I've always wanted to master the violin. And so I ended up learning how to play the violin, not by hearing it, but by feeling it through the conductive vibrations of the instrument. And I'm not sharing that with you to impress you, but to impress upon you and all those who may be listening to this that we can do the same. It's not our limitation, do not define us. It's our response that does. It's our response that does that. The mentality can help each and all of us to defy those odds that come against us, and that we can do hard things.
Yeah.
And I would just count for that to all the parents and the teachers to not give up on their kids, just like they didn't give up on me. And yeah, they may be tough right now, but I promise you, there will be a day, just like when I went back 30 years later and thanked my very first speech language pathologist for never giving up on me. We'll come to our senses at some point.
What if we have a parent who still says, I don't want my child to sign, who still feels like there's a stigma for that?
Unfortunately, there is, and I respect everybody's choices. Everybody has that agency to choose what they feel is best for their child. And I support either way, but I would say be open-minded to sign language. I kind of wish, looking back in my life, that I had learned sign before, and I'm grateful that I can talk and speak. But the sign language has been such a wonderful blessing in my life, be able to communicate in ways that I haven't been able to. It's also helped me to express myself more. Facial expression, body language. I was very shy back then, but that's helped me to open myself up more. It's built my confidence. And so, yeah, I would just say just be open to hands and voices. I don't see any harm in either one.
Yeah.
Whatever helps establish communication with the family. You need to connect with your loved ones and your family members, whether they're your child or whatnot. But
Yeah.
just remember, it's going to be a lot of hard work. It's not going to be an easy thing to just pick up in one day. It's going to take some time. Like I said,
Yeah.
13 years of speech for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
paid off. The sign language is so fun too.
Well, I think it's hard work either way. You had hard work learning how to speak. Parents have hard work learning how to sign. But I think, again, it doesn't have to be either or. I think you can have both these days. It's
I,
definitely, the world
I
is open
agree.
in that way.
I,
Okay. I have a last question for you.
yeah.
That is, I know you are married, you have a beautiful wife, you've got beautiful children. Do they sign with you?
Yes. Good question. So when I was dating my wife, our first date, we talked, we didn't sign. And then on our second date, we were at a restaurant and I can't remember exactly what happened, but I started moving my hands. And sometimes, you know how we do that? We just start moving our hands and we start signing, we don't even know it. And then I noticed my wife, my date at the time, saw that I was signing, and so she started signing. I'm like, oh, she's gonna be my wife.
She knew sign already, or she
A
just was kind
little
of
bit.
following? Wow.
She
Okay.
had two deaf sisters,
Gosh.
but neither one of them signed.
Okay.
But they have a severe hearing loss. And
Oh,
so my wife at that time wanted to learn sign just because
yeah.
she was curious in the deaf world and et cetera.
Yeah.
So she wasn't really good, but she was pretty good. So we were able to have a basic conversation, and that was so fun. That was the beginning of a wonderful courtship and dating, and then we ended up getting married. And then with our kids, in the summertime, when they're out of school, I teach them. Daddy and my two girls that sit on the couch, and I teach them. every day. I'll teach them some sign, and that's been fun.
I love it. That's so cool. Well, okay. What's one thing before we end our little interview here? What's one thing that you would want people to know that you think would just be something that you could share that would just be good or helpful?
Don't let your challenges define you. Let
Mm.
them refine you.
Yeah.
I think we're so hard on ourselves nowadays, and don't let the world define you uh,
Yeah.
of what you are. Who you are is what you are. Like, don't try to be a remix of somebody else. Just be you. Let people get to know the quirky, fantastic, real fantastic you. Just remember, you don't need to try to be everything. Just don't try to be like somebody else that you're not. Like I said, I tried to be like my dad or my uncle. And try to be, if you have a good role model, yes, that's a good thing. But it makes you a better person. But just be you. Be yourself. Don't beat yourself up like I did when I was younger. And but you will find that true freedom and that true inexpressible joy once you come to realize that, you know what? This is who I am. This is my label. This is my brand. This is my story. This is my voice. This is who I am. It's not a flaw. It's a future. It's not a penalty. It's a blessing. And so just try to keep that positive attitude, and it will make a huge difference in your life.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with Justin Osmond, the son of Merrill Osmond, lead singer of the famous Osmond Family. I was personally really touched by Justin's young perspective that he was the black sheep of the family, when of course no one in his family would have considered him that. Justin's journey is just such a powerful reminder that while the road can be lonely, you are never truly alone. One of the biggest takeaways from his story is that importance of identity, knowing who you are in a world that doesn't always understand your hearing loss. If Justin's story resonated with you, I want you to know that there is more where that comes from. In the Professional Academy, we have curated over 25 encouraging stories from other deaf and hard of hearing mentors who all have hearing loss, some who use sign, some who don't, some who do both, like Justin. And they've all faced their struggles as individuals with hearing loss, and they've come out the other side successful and empowered. You'll find all of it in the Deaf Identity Unit through both the Professional Academy as well as the Friend Academy, which is our parent program. The unit is designed specifically to help kids move past that insecurity that Justin described and start building the confidence that they need to really be able to find themselves, who they are, and where they fit into the world. Click the description section of this video to join either the Professional or the Friend Academy so that you can dive into that Deaf Identity Unit today. Thank you to Justin Osmond for sharing your journey.